agenda is we probably will not be working a bill today. I need to get with Gordon Self and make sure that I'm straight on a procedure for the balloon amendments. So got that out of the way right off the bat. Also in your packets, Tom Whitaker did provide us update on the trucking terms. Wow, we got some feedback somewhere. Thank you, Andrew, for taking care of that. We're now turn our attention to bill introductions. First bill introduction I have is Lindsay Douglas.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Lindsay Douglas, Deputy Secretary at the Kansas Department of Transportation. I'm here to request introduction of RS number 0561. This is the IKE Transportation Program Cleanup Bill that the Secretary mentioned in her 101 presentation. The three things that we are trying to accomplish with that is to allow for an exemption to what we call the T-Works rule, where one phase of every T-Works project needs to be let before any new IKE projects could move forward. We are only asking for that exemption if there were stimulus funds, just so we can take full advantage of that. The second thing is to allow for a lower overall cost of a project that could be delivered using alternative delivery. So taking that from a $100 million cap down to 10. We've been working with our partners, the contracting partners, on that. Both of those are very technical. And the third item was related to our bond cap. The rating agencies for our bonding currently use the entirety of the State Highway Fund to figure our bond covenants, and we just want to make sure that that same definition is reflected in the state statute. So those are the three things. I know they sound probably more complicated than they are, and we'd be happy to request introduction of that bill.
Committee, any questions? Any objections to the introduction? The bill will be introduced. I believe we have David or Deanne online with a bill introduction.
Yes, sir. This is David Harper with Division of Vehicles. We have several bills that we would like to request for introduction today. These are all bills from last year. They passed out of your committee. I believe they all passed out of the full Senate with 100% yes votes, but they didn't get any further before the session ended last year. So these are repeat bills. First, we have RS 0518. This would amend KSA 8135 to change the requirements for odometer certification on the certificate of title to match recently amended federal law.
Committee, questions on that bill? Any objections? The bill will be introduced.
Thank you.
You have two more?
Three more, actually.
Excellent.
Okay, we have RS 0519, and this would amend KSA 82404 to increase the amount of the bond that licensed automobile dealerships are required to hold from $30,000 to $50,000.
Committee, questions? Any objections? Bill will be introduced.
Thank you. Our next RS actually includes we bundled three amendments that all relate to driver's licensing. So in RS 0550, first one would be to amend KSA 8240 to expand the age of the drivers eligible to take advantage of our online driver's license renewal option. Currently, the age is states from 21 to less than 50. We would propose to expand that to 21 to less than 65.
Committee, any questions? Any objections? That one will be introduced. Did you get that RS number, Adam Siebers?
I did. Sorry about that. I was just tweaking with my computer a little bit. I did get that.
Okay.
Excellent.
And the second one under the same RS 0550 would amend KSA 8247. This would allow drivers the option to receive their their driver's license renewal notices electronically instead of the yellow postcard that they receive now. So it's an option for them to receive electronic notification of driver's license renewals.
Any questions or objections? Seeing none, that bill will be introduced.
Okay, and the third under that RS number would amend KSA 8262. And this is a technical amendment, would modify the start date on the 90-day state suspensions for individuals with unpaid tickets. And this would allow them to build the ability to be issued restricted driving privileges.
Any questions? I believe I was introducing each component, but all three of those are in one bill underneath one RS number. Is that correct, David?
That is correct, sir.
Okay. Well, I'll ask it one more time then, just to be sure, since I asked for the other two. Are there any questions or objections? Seeing none, we'll introduce that one. We got that one triple covered.
All right, thank you. And our final one is RS 0776. And this would amend KSA 81016, and it would transfer the administration and the oversight of the DUI ignition interlock device program from the Department of Revenue to the Kansas Highway Patrol.
Interesting. Any questions? Any objections? It'll be introduced.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our request. Appreciate the time.
Just lost my participant list. I got to get it back up. I'll just ask, is there anybody else that has any bill introductions? Hearing none, we'll turn our attention to the hearing on Senate Bill 18. Adam, can you give us a brief description?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. All right, sorry. Senate Bill 18 would allow a person to register a military surplus vehicle with the Division of Vehicles for road use. This was a bill similar to the bill that was the committee considered last year. The language is nearly identical, except for there is one change that ultimately resulted where with what vehicles will qualify. I'll go through those qualifications now. The bill does define what a military surplus vehicle would include. It would be a vehicle that has 3 or fewer axles, meets the legal size and weight limits that are prescribed by law for other vehicles, is less than 35 years of age, was manufactured for use in the U.S. military, and here's the change from last year, or any other country that was a member of NATO, essentially at the time the vehicle was manufactured. And lastly, the vehicle cannot be a fully tracked vehicle. The bill provides that these vehicles will be treated similarly as what we have in statute for special interest vehicles or street rod vehicles. There's a registration is valid for 1 year and must be renewed annually. The cost would be $26 with a one-time processing fee of $20. And they'd be issued a special interest license plate with a decal on the plate. Lastly, when an individual would have to have a VIN inspection done on these vehicles with the Highway Patrol. Again, this would just be a VIN inspection prior to the registration, and that also an individual who would want to register a vehicle must have one or more other vehicles registered with the division used for regular transportation in order to register such military vehicle. And with that, I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Many questions for Adam? Senator Hawk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That section on line 26, special interest, doesn't really apply to these military surplus vehicles. Is that correct?
That is correct. How the bill is drafted, it really just fit them into that same kind of class, but they're not. They're separate types of vehicles, but they they kind of modeled the framework or put the military surplus vehicles into that same framework as what currently exists for these special interest vehicles.
And then quick follow-up. I wanted to make sure on page 2, line 16 and 17, that weight restriction didn't apply to military surplus. And I'm pretty sure it doesn't, but I just wanted to be sure.
Senator Hawk, that's correct. I believe last year's bill, there may have been, we may have had to redraft that because we hadn't separated them out. So by definition, the 500-pound limitation, which currently exists for special interest and street rod vehicles, would have applied. However, that issue was taken care of. If you can see on line 15, that period stops the sentence, and then only that 500-pound requirement would apply for special interest vehicles, including street rods. And so that the military vehicles should not be included in that 500-pound limitation.
Good catch. Good job. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Pyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just curious, what do other states allow? I mean, I can see Texas doing this. I'm just curious what else we have out there.
The other states, I'm not sure who will be testifying today. I know when they testified last year, I believe Texas was one of the states they mentioned as one of the impetus for or basis for the bill draft. I'm sure probably the proponents, if there are any testifying, will be able to provide further explanation on what the other states, Texas, Oklahoma, do in similar circumstances.
Representative Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And maybe this is for somebody who's testifying, but does the revisor know if military vehicles and NATO vehicles actually have identification numbers on them as a practice?
Testimony last year, and I'm just going to base I don't have any direct knowledge of this, was that there is a different than the standard VIN number that assigns for consumer vehicles. They have their own kind of VIN numbering system for military vehicles, and that NATO has some sort of similar standards and system. I can't speak to exactly what they have, but I believe that was the impetus for why they included only the NATO vehicles and not other outside non-NATO vehicles, because the U.S. military does have a set standard for the development and their own kind of VIN numbering system. It's not used by the consumers branches of manufacturers. I know that for a fact, but the NATO version, I'll probably have to let someone else speak to that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Committee, further questions? Seeing none, a little bit of help for you, Senator, on the VIN numbers. The Humvees have a normal VIN number, but some of your larger vehicles have a 16-digit military VIN that's on there. The committee did amend this last year to include the larger vehicles when it came over from the Humvee. We placed the weight restrictions on that. We also put in 3 axles. There's a lot of these 6-wheel vehicles that are used by our cities and counties. They get them through the Forest Service for their fire trucks. After they've had them through the program for a year, I believe they get a title. They use them for a while, then they'll sell them to farmers when they get rid of them. A lot of them use them to haul water out to cattle. That's why we made sure that the 500-pound limit hauling in this did not apply to them, because it'd be useless for a farmer to try and haul hay or haul water with a 500-pound limit on it. Some of them are fairly tough vehicles. They work pretty good. I've actually ridden in one to haul water to cattle when I was out in Hugoton, and it works great. We did put the 3-axle limit on it last year because when the bill was first introduced in the House, it did not have the KDOT weight restrictions in it. They did correct that before it came over. But we were looking at the bill. We had a heads up it was coming over late, so we were already looking at it, and we came up with the 3 axles and some of the other limits too. And I believe we got a bill. The committee amended it to include foreign vehicles so that they can take advantage of some of the Sterling and Land Rover vehicles that come out of Canada. That way was the way it went. I promised the committee I would introduce this the same way it came out. However, I did not. because we said foreign vehicles, and we realized that even after it came out of committee, that the only ones that meet the federal safety standards, I believe it was FS 91, were the vehicles that were manufactured in countries that were a member of NATO. So I added that one change in, and that's why I submitted my testimony today, was to make sure people knew that it was changed from last year's, because I wanted to make sure they applied the safety standards to it. Other than that, it's identical to the one that came out of this committee and just got killed. There we go. Back to proponents. I know Representative Williams didn't know whether she could make it. She submitted written testimony. We do have our own Senator Hawk. You can either go forward or testify from where you're standing.
Easier to take my mask off here, Mr. Chairman. And my testimony, actually, if I were a statesman, I would say exactly what Senator Peterson just said. Thank you. But since I wrote this out last year and I got to read it again, and Senator Pyle preempted some of the things I wanted to say by asking about Texas, I'll go ahead and try and give a little background. This is one of those bills, and a special thanks to Chairman Peterson for his leadership and knowledge about how we ought to do this. I brought this to him, and he pointed out that Representative Williams had similar contact and interest in this bill, and I did work with her last year. I got it because I had constituents who had come to me and said, why can't I register I have this Humvee, and it's a military vehicle, and why can't I register it in Kansas? And I said, wow, I live by Fort Riley. I see these vehicles on roads, and particularly I-70 and convoys and so on. They were good enough to drive when the military had them, but all of a sudden when they get sold, that our consumers and constituents can't get a title for them. So I went ahead and called the Highway Patrol and said, maybe there's just a small glitch. Well, I found out that there's a sticker on a lot of them that says for off-road use only, so the Highway Patrol wouldn't do it. And then I had a constituent talk to our reviser, Jill Shelley, said, well, what do other states do with this? And if you look in my testimony, Senator Pyle, Texas isn't in there, but you'll see on page 2 that Kentucky, Idaho, North Carolina, Virginia, I think, as Jill always does thorough work, there probably is something about Texas in it, but I just pulled those out because they each had a different way of titling these vehicles. But all I could tell my constituent is they needed to go out of state and see if they could get it titled in another state, and then maybe they could bring it back. And then I think Chairman Peterson asked me or pointed out that the Forest Service, and I'm on their advisory board, and I said, well, how do they deal with that? Do they get them titled, or do we just give them a pass? Well, actually, there's 2 ways they get their vehicles, and if you look in my testimony, the federal excess property is one, and they actually, when they give those to the cities and counties for their fire service, that stays with the Forest Service. And then they had a newer program from the Department of Defense, the Firefighter Property Program, and those stayed with DOD. And there was a way to get an SF-97, which I don't know what that is, but I'm sure Chairman Peterson does, certificate to obtain title. So it was kind of a complex thing. And so we were really hoping that this bill could get out last year, but I think Chairman Peterson, by getting the NATO piece in there, us getting that 500-pound limit, I originally thought you all might want only 2 axles, and one of my colleagues, when I told him I was working on this bill, said, well, I don't want those big 3-wheelers out there running over me on the highway. Well, as we talked about it, one of the uses, and Chairman Peterson pointed that out very clearly, was to use them in terms of some of the farm work. So I think it is an improved bill by having the 3 axles, the NATO piece on there, and I'm very happy with the bill this year, and I hope that we can pass it out favorably. And I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time, but I'm sure with the excellent job that research did, we have no questions whatsoever, and we'll pass this out without any amendments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Laid down the gauntlet, didn't I, Senator Pyle?
Committee questions?
I did scare them.
Okay, great job, Tom.
Mr. Chair, I just have one question. If I could.
Yes.
Why is it always the people from your same caucus that give you a hard time in committees? I've never figured that out.
What a phenomenal testimony that is from my colleague over here. How's that? Are we tied to the fact that we need to have a 3-axle limit? I mean, I don't see why we would want to have a 3-axle limit, because the more axles we have, it actually disperses the weight more appropriately across the roads. And, you know, if I don't know the nature of the types of vehicles necessarily, that it would need to be more than that. But it seems as though counterproductive to take the number of axles away for that purpose. Just wondering if maybe you, Senator Hogg, would want to comment.
My response to that would be that I was concerned about having more than 2 axles last year. And I think moving it up to 3, and if we look at the types of vehicles that are likely surplus vehicles, military, that we would be able to have, and the consumers, the businesses that want to rehab those and make them for sale, I think are looking primarily at the 2-axle Humvees, but there are the 3 axles. And considering that I had what I thought was a legitimate question about how many of these might actually get out on the road, I think it's wise not to go more than 3 axles personally. And if we find out there's a demand once we get this started, then I think we could revisit this bill in the future.
I had this bill drafted with 3 axles because that is the way it came out of our committee last year. I do know that there are trucks being used in Iowa that the military sells. I think you can find them on Iron Planet or GovX, not GovX, one of the government sales websites that they're using for hauling grain. It looks like a semi-truck, except it has 4 axles. But those are over the 26,000 pound range. So I decided that I would just leave it at the 3. They do have a vehicle that has 4 axles that would spread the weight out and make a lot less hassle on our travel, but I haven't seen any in use, and I thought, since I said I would introduce it the same, I did introduce the NATO change on the foreign countries, because if not, there's some countries that make vehicles that are not up to the safety standards that the North Atlantic Treaty Organization has. And I thought I'd keep it the same. So that's how that drafting came about. We did have a gentleman from Texas. A lot of these vehicles that are being remanufactured in I think it's Augusta is where one of them is. There's another spot over, it may be in Miami County. I don't know my county that well, over in the eastern part. They take these and they fix them up, and some of them, the doors are bashed in and the little roof panels are. They're using a lot of our aircraft workers and stuff in the Wichita area to go over there, hiring them on and helping them manufacture parts to rehab them. They're selling them, a lot of them, to Oklahoma and Texas. As the good senator mentioned in his testimony, not all the vehicles have the stamp on them that said for off-road use. Some of these vehicles you can buy, you get lucky, you get one with your paperwork that doesn't have the stamp for off-road use, even though it's the exact identical vehicle. You can title it and go right down the road. Other ones, they have the stamp on it. It happened during different administrations, different people in charge of the military, and so it's something that probably needs to be taken care of. We have a good business going on in Kansas, and I think there's 34 different specialty equipment manufacturers located in our state that do little parts. Hope that helps your, I mean, I would not, personally, I would not have a problem if you took off the 4 axles, but if you took off the axle limit, since we have the state KDOT limits in there, that's the key thing, is having the weight limits in there. That is so key to our highways.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with everything you said and wished I'd said it exactly like that. But I do want to emphasize, I think the big holdup on the bill from the House side last year, and I don't remember if you were on that committee or not, but was KDOT's legitimate concern about weight limits, and we did put that in on the Senate bill, correct, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, I think they put it in when they kicked it out of the House. Yeah. We made sure it was in when we were discussing another piece to handle this, because we had I believe there's 4 senators that had constituents that had this issue. They'd bought these vehicles and they weren't lucky enough to get the one with didn't have the stamp on it. And now they're useless. I mean, well, they could use them as like a gator on the farm, but you couldn't classify them as an ATV, so you couldn't drive them around, so. But it's an interesting deal. I learned a lot about axle weights and stuff. Actually helped me out on the hybrid bill when we were doing it, because we learned that some of the hybrids, when we raised the registration fee, they have a lot of weight from the batteries and they run narrower tires for more efficiency. So they actually put a lot more pounds per square inch down on the surface of the road. So it was a good learning process last year for me, but I introduced it because I said I would, but I did make the one change for NATO. I would have had that amendment on the floor and probably would ask for the bill to be withdrawn if that amendment would not have went on for the NATO. Because there are some, made from some countries, there's some military vehicles that are just made to move people, not necessarily be safe. Further questions for Senator Hawk? Thank you, sir. Appreciate your testimony.
Thank you, and that was an excellent question, Senator Pittman.
Are there any other proponents wishing to testify? You might note that there is written testimony from the Department of Transportation and from myself. You probably have heard most of my testimony already on the answering questions. Next, we'll turn to neutrals. Deborah Barnes, Staff Attorney with Kansas League of Municipalities. Welcome back to the committee.
Good morning, Chairman. Thank you. I'm Deborah Barnes, Staff Attorney at the League of Kansas Municipalities. And thanks for giving us an opportunity to come. In fact, I think that Senator Peterson and Senator Hawke have made all the points that I would want to make. As you pointed out, when the bill came to the committee last year, there were some things that gave concern to ourselves and to KDOT. The size and weight restrictions were not written in, and they are now. So really, I'm here to say thank you very much to those responsible for introducing the bill this year with these changes. And you've already spoken about the changes, why they're there, why they're necessary, and why they're important. So I will finish my testimony there. Thank you.
Any questions for Deborah? See none? Thank you. I was wanting to work a bill today. However, I do not have all the procedures down for balloon amendments from our revisers and gotten with Gordon. We're going to have to figure out what procedure we want to use for our committee. It may be that we wind up for a while having to bring our laptops and have the balloon amendments submitted electronically. It's going to be the possession and confidentiality issues is what we're dealing with, and hopefully I'll have those settled this afternoon. I need to talk to Gordon self and then get back with Adam, and we'll get that issued out. I don't want to have to keep changing rules, so with that, we're going to be adjourned. Thank you. Yes. More issues on the tech. I was planning on working 36 at titling bill, but we'll move forward. Thank you. There is no meeting tomorrow, no meeting scheduled. It says meeting on call of the chair, but there is no meeting.